If you've ever wondered what it'd be like to play a Korean Path of Exile, then you're going to need to keep wondering, as in the hundreds of hours that I have spent playing the Russian and now the North American version of Lost Ark, they are about as similar as hands are to feet. They both kind of look alike, I guess. Okay, actually in retrospect, that was a bad analogy. Let me try this again. You can walk on your hands and pick things up with your feet. Okay, no, actually, you know what? That doesn't apply to Lost Ark in this instance. Well, you get what I'm trying to say. Lost Ark is a very different game to Path of Exile or Diablo. It might have the same top-down isometric perspective, but it is a very different beast. Hey, my name is STIX, and welcome back to another episode of Is It Worth Playing? A video series where we analyze every facet of an MMORPG and attempt to come up with as objective of an opinion as we can as to whether or not a title is worth playing in 2022. If this is your first time here and you're interested in what MMOs are or are not worth playing, then I urge you to check out the last episode at the end of this video and subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay updated with every video I make of this series. Quick shout out to our patrons over on Patreon. You guys are all amazing. Every bit of support helps us maintain this dream we get to live of creating gaming videos on YouTube for all of you. Now today we are taking a look at Lost Ark's international release. Having put hundreds of hours into the Russian version of this game, it's kind of a surreal experience to be able to finally play this officially in English. Lost Ark is a top-down isometric MMORPG. Yes, you may have noticed that there is actually an A in that acronym. That single letter is used to differentiate it from other MMOs and stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Action Role-Playing Game, something that is apparently different from an MMORPG like Black Desert or Terra that are, well, action MMOs. Lost Ark takes place in a fantasy medieval setting with humans, with elves, or furries if you want to go that route. There are multiple different classes, although, and let me preface this by stating that this is only at present, but the classes are gender locked, meaning that each class can only be played as a single gender, much like Black Desert Online. According to Smilegate, they are working on removing those restrictions on gender locking, but we will have to wait and see whether that ever comes to fruition. Character creation itself is fairly extensive. You can make some absolutely gorgeous characters. And if you happen to unfortunately be ugly like I am IRL, and you feel like you want to, for some reason or another, make a character in-game that accurately resembles you or represents you, well, then you can make some slightly less gorgeous characters. So unfortunately, we are out of luck. Lost Ark is a very different MMO than players are traditionally used to. And this is very evident by the sheer number of players trying the game out. People have been eagerly anticipating this game ever since it was announced, and with Amazon's infinite marketing potential, including every streamer opting to stream this game, there's no wonder it achieved the concurrent numbers that it did. Again, Lost Ark does utilize a top-down isometric perspective as opposed to the typical third-person perspective that we're used to in our MMOs. Typically, MMOs share the same control scheme. You use your mouse to rotate the camera, you use your WASD keys to move your character, keys like C to open your character or your profile page, and keys like B or I to open your bag or inventory. You have abilities set to number keys or your F keys, or shortcuts like shift or control number keys. In Lost Ark, you move using your left or right mouse button. Abilities are bound to your letters, and your number keys are reserved for less important items like potions or mounts. This does take some getting used to. I cannot tell you how often I try to right click to rotate my screen so I can get a better view of something and end up running off like my dad did back when I was a kid. But hey, the good news? I have brothers and sisters I never knew about. Honestly, this isn't too difficult to acclimate to the difference in control style. I feel like it will always be a little bit awkward, but not enough where it's really going to have any kind of impact on my enjoyment of the game. Different is good. Not always, but I mean in this instance it is. The world of Arcasia is an enormous place. There are over 10 entire continents to explore, with each continent having their own unique zones, their own unique cities, their own unique monsters, quests, and purpose. The zones themselves are small and linear though, which is probably my single complaint with this game. I'm a fan of large open areas where you can wander in any direction. You can find small little treasure chests, elite monsters that you wouldn't be aware of without exploring, locate missable optional dungeons. Exploration is key to enjoying the zone that you're in. It is integral to fully becoming enthralled in the area that you will be potentially spending hours in leveling. This is what made WoW's zones so special. Unfortunately, the map for quite a few zones consists of small, thin, straight lines, which I understand isn't necessarily going to be an issue for everyone. MRSSSTIX, as an example, likes it small, thin, and straight too. But the world is not comprised exclusively of zones so small. On the contrary, zones get larger, and once you obtain the ability to sail your own ship, you have the entire ocean to explore, which is exactly what I wanted. The ocean is immense. It takes several minutes to get from where you are to where you want to be, and there are a variety of tiny little islands that you can find scattered around the world that you can dock your ship at. This provides me that sense of exploration that I was looking for. Leveling is about what you'd expect. You follow through the main scenario, moving from hub to hub, region to region, stopping bad guys from doing bad guy things, meeting new NPCs to join you on your journey. Leveling is fast and fluid. I never really felt like I was forced to do anything other than the main scenario if I didn't want to, but I chose to pick up side quests wherever I could. It's a force of habit really at this juncture. I don't like hitting a leveling wall that halts your progression and requires you to do side quests because you're too low. Side quests themselves though were very fast. They didn't send me all over the zone. They were as simple as just kill a few monsters or loot a few items, typically tying into the main scenario quest that you were doing anyway, or at least found in the same area that the main scenario quest was found in. That way it allowed for you to go and complete both the side quests and the main scenario quests, move back to the hub, and then complete everything simultaneously. Although I do find it absolutely atrocious having to loot or eliminate 100 of the same monster or item at a time. That isn't fun. That is just a waste of time. Leveling dungeons were a lot more fun than I had anticipated them being. You could do them on normal or hard difficulties, although admittedly, and this is both a pro and a con here, both difficulties were doable solo. Neither provided too large a challenge that a larger group was required for you to complete it. Not that queues for dungeons were an issue. With 1.3 million people playing concurrently, queues were instanced, and since role queues aren't a thing, we don't have to concern ourselves with those horrendous DPS queues. Speaking of dungeons though, this is one other aspect of this game that I found to be underwhelming. The community. The number of threads that I saw on Reddit from players playing through Lost Ark for the very first time that were just berated, that were insulted and verbally abused because they didn't skip. Every scene in the dungeon was actually kind of disgusting. I even personally saw this firsthand once or twice. Not necessarily the berating or the insulting or that toxicity from players, more just random people that kept spamming skip pulls over and over. Generally, the community outside of that specific group content did seem fun, they seemed helpful, they seemed to be enjoying themselves, but players that are so focused on shaving a few minutes off of their completion timer at the expense of ruining other players' first time experiences are entitled. If running into other players that want to experience the content as it's supposed to be experienced is an issue, you can always solo queue it. When we see Korea is making an MMO, we think two things. One, the game is going to look gorgeous and play incredibly well, and two, this game is going to have no story. Oh, and three, the game is going to be heavily pay to win. And that is a topic that I'm not even going to touch in this video because opinions on it are very, very mixed. And people's definition of the term pay to win varies literally from individual to individual. So you guys can go and debate that yourselves in the comment section below if you want to. Regardless, Lost Ark is different in that while the former, the game looks gorgeous and plays incredibly well, holds true, the latter, the game having no story, does not. On the contrary, Lost Ark has quite an interesting narrative. It's voice acted, it spans every zone in the game we encountered over the course of our way to level 50, and it actually made sense. Playing through Black Desert's story, or Estelia's story, Bless's story, Terra's story, they're all just absolute convoluted messes that you try to forget even exist. Or, well, actually in retrospect, you don't even need to try to pretend they don't exist. You just end up forgetting without even realizing. And while thankfully Lost Ark has a lot of story to keep you entertained long term, it is not the only form of content worth looking forward to. The game is filled with an immense amount of content to partake of. Sure, grinding to level 50 isn't very difficult. On average, you might get there playing casually within a few days. It is what comes after level 50 that's important. If you have a guide readily available, you've no doubt already been slowly working towards completing your goal of collecting all 233 billion Makoko seeds. You'll also want to start researching your fortress or your crafting professions if you're not strongly against crafting like I am. You want to focus on completing island quests and stories. There are chaos dungeons to run, guardian raids, abyss dungeons, PvP. You might feel a little bit overwhelmed at times by the sheer selection of content, but it's all important to upgrading your item level. And the higher your item level gets, the more content you gain access to. This is completely disregarding the creation of ults. Oh, you didn't know you needed ults to keep up with other players? Oh, it's so sweet. Although admittedly, ult maintenance is not nearly as bad as it is in games like World of Warcraft, so realistically, it's not something that I can complain about. And I love leveling ults, so it's a win-win for me. Speaking of PvP, there are two dedicated types of PvP in Lost Ark. On the one hand, you can engage another player in a duel. This can take place anywhere, at any time, and is a way of humiliating your friend because he hasn't been playing very long and doesn't understand his class. Alternatively, there are PvP arenas that are unlocked after progressing through the story. Normal arenas have 3 game modes themselves. 3v3 team matches where players enter as a team, 3v3 individual matches where players enter individually and fight separate 1v1 matches, and finally, 6-player death matches. This is the game mode where one player just hides for the entire match while the other 5 people all kill each other. And then that 6th final player ends up picking off whoever's left. You also have competitive arena matches, cooperative battles, and custom games that you can play with your friends. Interestingly, arenas have their own builds completely separate from your field build, meaning that you're required to build 2 different characters. One for when you're out in the world questing while you're running dungeons or raids and various types of PvE content, and one for when you're actively engaging in PvP. And for those of you, like me, who are too poor to afford a house in real life, then you can live out your fantasy of having your very own island in Lost Ark. I've never been all too fond of player housing in my games, but I know MRSSTIX is, which is why she is always in charge of decorating the interior of our home. I mean, I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys here. Sometimes I even struggle dressing myself. Trying to figure out what shirt goes with what pair of pants is an absolute nightmare. But I mean, at the same time, that is what we have significant others for, right? You guys can relate. It's to make up for what we lack. At the end of the day, Lost Ark is an absolutely incredible MMORPG. Smilegate have chosen to do something completely different to what is traditional in our MMOs with this, something that was contrastingly different from the norm. And it has worked out for them, being one of Korea's largest MMOs and becoming the #2 largest game to have ever launched onto Steam. They genuinely built something beautiful, something that not only looks visually superior to a large number of its competitors, but also plays substantially better as well. Sure, zones might be a little snug and might not promote that same sense of grandiose exploration that I want, but no game is infallible. You'll always find fault with some aspects of what you're playing. It's impossible not to. There's likely a lot that I have missed in this review, but with how large and filled with content Lost Ark is, there's really no helping it. Is this the greatest MMO? To some people, maybe. To me, no. But it is definitely one of the most unique, genuinely fun MMOs I have played. I would give the combat an easy 10 out of 10 because it is just that good. Graphically, the game is an absolutely gorgeous game. There's no questioning that. Honestly, the narrative was much better than I would have expected of a Korean MMO, but still nothing extraordinary. The world itself is massive and filled with varied environments, but the zones are a little too linear to fully enjoy. There's an incredible amount of content present that you'll always have something to fill your time with. Overall, Lost Ark is easily one of the best MMOs available right now. Given that it is a completely free title, there's even more reason to play it. It's beautiful, it plays better than any other free MMO, and it is updated regularly with new classes, regions, and content. Now, if you're interested in my thoughts on other MMOs, you can go ahead and check out my last review over here, or you can check out this video right here for a list of free games that you might genuinely be interested in.